I'd like you to welcome Christian Kyriacou.
Thank you, Adele. Are we aware there are more ancestors in spirit than living people in this room?
No.
Look around you. Each one of us has at least 7 generations of ancestors that are accessible to us. So, with about 70 people in this room, if I do the numbers, that's nearly 500 people in this room, either in physical form or in spirit, that we all have access to if we know how to connect with them. But they're working with us all the time. And each one of us has apparently at least 30 soulmates in each lifetime. They could be in this room for each one of you. So it's what draws people together in soul groups. We reincarnate, we come back for healing, resolution of past situations. And this has always fascinated me, and so much of my work seems to be drawn into that ancestral patterning and helping people remember, because we all actually know it's all in our DNA memory, all these past lives, all the ancestral connections. But for the most time, we don't realize it, we don't remember it. So what I do with people, and I have done now for nearly 24 years, and touching on 1,500 consultations to date. So a lot of them are ancestral connected. So let's go back to some real basics of the landscape form school and Ming tombs, where Feng shui was very much to do with honouring the ancestors. So of course here in China, the Ming tombs, some of you may be familiar with this. The form school, the black, the mountain, the green dragon, the yang, the yin tiger, the red phoenix in front, and the Feng shui area where the tombs are. That's where we get our layout for our homes and offices and so on, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. So what attracts us to a house or location? This resonance. Do you feel at home where we live? We've had a couple of examples this morning of tuning into our home. They're going in from the front door, finding the heart of the home. That's the crux of it, because we can connect with the ancestral through the heart, not through the head. It doesn't work. We can think about it, but you've got to go through the heart to connect with it. So this whole thing of good luck, bad luck, portents, fate, free will, do we actually have a choice? And I love that Shakespeare, the fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves. How much control have we got? Who can we blame? We can't. It comes down to us. Or are we playing out our fathers, our forefathers, our grandfathers, and so on? I've worked with people where I've gone back 6 generations in order to resolve something that happened then that's actually happening now in his lifetime. So, we're not alone in all this. So there are so many different astrological systems, but what are they actually telling us? Is this what's guiding us? Or have we chosen the time of birth that gives us our astrology, whether it's 4 pillars that we heard about this morning, the 9-star key, the Western astrology, and so on. Have we chosen our parents? It's said that we do. You do wonder why sometimes. This is a house down in Hampshire, Montesfont Abbey, some of you may know it. And it's a lovely example that when Gilbert Russell bought it in 1934, he didn't know this, but when he started to renovate it, he discovered that it was his great-great ancestor who founded the priory 800 years earlier in 1201. So what brought him back? What was that thread that actually brought him back to that property? This actually is the north window of Shark Cathedral, which is a golden mean spiral, which is a heart harmonic. So every time that comes up, it's an opportunity to reset your whole DNA frequency. So it's sort of pretty powerful stuff, the geometry. So where are these ancestral memories held, the past life patterns? You know, are they in the past? Or are they right here, now, in this room, in each one of us? And all this can be accessed right here and now in the present moment, only in the present moment. And so when I'm working with people or teaching my students in the academy, I say you don't have to know, you know, all the 50 different, I remember with Gina, you know, we were studying like 50 subjects, you know, basic feng shui. You don't actually need to study that much, but you need to study something. But if you go into a space and there is a need, and you connect to source into Akashic memory, you will be given whatever you need to know. We don't have to be a computer and hold everything. It's all there. It's the accessing that it's really all about. So the training is about how to access these memories. And they're all stored in our DNA, all our past ancestral memories. It's also in the Akashic space, in every building, in every home, and also in the water molecules that hold memory. Yeah. So every bit of building material has water, otherwise it would be dust. And so it holds memory. So any activity in the building will be remembered and played back when we activate it through consciousness. And depending on our own story, which we've heard about as well quite a bit this morning, our own story will activate that channel or that channel, and it plays back. So, you know, a house, you know, it's built of many layers of reality. It's not just bricks and mortar, it's a conscious building. It remembers, it's awake. And the ancients knew this when they designed Knossos there, the Parthenon, Indian buildings. Shark Cathedral, if you've been there, one of the most conscious, powerful buildings there is. Really active, very powerful, with the labyrinth and so on. So worth a visit if you've not been there. So let's have a look at one consultation which took me out to BC in Canada. 320 acres, a herd of horses roaming freely. And this was about Liz, the owner, getting back her feminine power that was stripped away from her through execution in a previous lifetime on this particular piece of land. That red stone there is the only red stone in 320 acres. And when we got to it, we found it. It just, a past life memory just opened up. We all saw what happened. And she was having to take it back. So she's come back to this land 200 odd years later with the help of the herd. And there is a village where there was a massacre of an indigenous village, and hundreds of people were still stuck there in spirit. And what brought me there was the horses, and I want you to tune into them on the video that comes up next. They weren't playing ball. The horses are so heart connected and intelligent. They refused to do it. She was running retreats here, but they just refused to work. So in a roundabout way, I get called in to discover the village and the massacre and her getting her power back from that previous incarnation. So amazing to meditate with the herd. And so have a look at this little short video and see what the horses tell you, because they actually carry the knowledge of what this whole story is about.
people from the village.
So they're not shamans from the past life. And that's how they got me there to resolve this situation of the village and the massacre. The funniest thing was it also got rid of my fear of horses, because we thought to get that footage, I said to Liz, how are we going to get the herd to run and charge so I can film them? I love filming, as you know. They said, right, you stand there in the field, I'm going to go the other side of the hill, and I'm going to scream at them, and they're going to run over the hill towards you, and you film. Right, I just realised what I just said. And so I was standing there with the video camera running, and I hear this screaming of Liz, shooing the horses, and suddenly these 14 horses, the power of them, just came over the brow of the hill, straight towards me, and it's like, it's either now or never, I've got to deal with it. And they just charged towards me, literally, and a lot of that footage you could see, they just parted either side of me. And I just had to stand still and, so I'm still here to tell the tale. But listen to what Liz had to say, because in this next piece, we didn't discover the village or the massacre until the last day when I was about to leave. And I would go up and down from the main house to where I was staying at the gatehouse, which was about a mile. And at this point, I'd feel this real heavy male presence jump in the back of the truck. It was really not nice, but I didn't know what to do with it at the time because we'd had dinner and a few bottles of wine. And so I mentioned it to Liz. She said that's exactly where she gets it. So we went to investigate, and there was an entrance of 2 stones, which was the entrance to the village. And she realizes the man in spirit who was jumping in the car was her father in a past life. So have a listen to what she's got to say.
In the entrance to the meadow by the Spirit Lodge. And I've always sensed a village that is somehow trapped between the earth plane and going to the light. It is a past life of mine, being part of the native culture. And my father comes forward from the tribe, and knowing that we're here to send them to the light, and all of the people came forward and chose to go into the portal that we opened for them. So all of them have moved off the land and home to their home in spirit, where all of their other relatives and who they trip is able to manifest. I feel sad in a way because I could feel their presence here, but we made it available. We let them know that they're welcome to come back, welcome to visit, and still go back to the light and live in that perfect place. You can feel their joy having gone there at long last. So it was a very, very powerful piece of the puzzle here. That equanimity has fallen into place.
Feel her emotion. I still, every time I watch that, it's really quite powerful. And one of the things I picked up there is how part of her was holding on to them for comfort and so on, and familiarity, which is something I find a lot working with people who have got somebody stuck in spirit and they won't let them go because they're in relationship with them. This often happens with single man or single woman. They're in relationship with another woman or man in spirit, and they're complaining that they can't find a partner in real life. It's because you have to let go of the one that's in spirit. So that happens quite a lot. The other aspect of this, her husband is an architect, Kevin, and he got a contract in Hawaii on this 1 mile beach here, and you can see the house just here, empty for 30 years, extraordinary. And as soon as he took the contract on as an architect, the herd in BC Canada, or some 8,000 miles away, all the animals started to fight and kill each other, the llamas, the dogs, and they had to get rid of a lot of them. Because the ancestors on the beach did not want the project to happen. So we get this sort of time factor through hundreds of years in ancestral connection. So my job, if I took it on, was to actually connect with the ancestors and try and get some resolution. So it's quite a long story, so we'll leave that one for the moment, but that's still ongoing. We've got me out to Hawaii, which is great. But actually I did, talking about dowsing, I did most of the work in my office on a plan with map dowsing, and actually got all the lines, all the vortexes, and actually said, don't build in these areas. And the architect actually redesigned the whole scheme to actually shift it around. So, but lots of other things that didn't happen after that. So who's running your home? This is a lovely one. It's called up north to the castle. It's just a big house. I don't know what to call it, castle. But it had 100 rooms, and it was one of these really run-down houses. And you know, 2 people living in it, and you know, all the carpets and curtains were threadbare. And we walked around virtually every room. I came across this really interesting room down the back of a stairway. I said, what goes on in here? And she says, oh, good Lord, I didn't know that was there. There's so many rooms, but it's like, okay, how some people live. But it's anyway, what was running the show here was quite fascinating. No, she doesn't want to be known. Here we go. So this is all this psychic energy always affects technology, as we know. Okay, stay. Right, so main stairs, you see the orbs. So whenever we've got orbs, it's elemental energy or ancestral energy, and we can see them in here. It's like a small chapel inside, it's incredible. And as you go up these stairs, you end up with this lady who was the aunt in spirit, who was still running the house from the other side. That was a problem. So I had to have words. So we get situations like that. Who's running the house? And so, you know, what we've got to consider in that sort of situation, you know, going in and doing basic feng shui or shifting furniture around, which is all very valid, but you've got to hit the core story. It's all about the story, as Davina was saying. You've got to get to the story. What is really going on? And actually bring that memory out in the owners. Because you cannot do anything for anyone, remember. All you can do is encourage someone to get to that, what I call the aha moment. Memory, resolution, healing. But it's the person who owns it, who has the karmic contract. And remember, when you work with someone in a consultation, if it's a couple, you've got to make sure you're working with the one who has the karmic contract with the house, not the other party. And it's very rare that 2 people, a couple, will both have the karmic contract. So you've got to make sure, if someone says, oh, my husband's not going to be here for the day because I'm playing golf or whatever, which we often hear is the woman that takes it on, you've got to make sure that she is the karmic owner. Sometimes it's the man. Otherwise, the consult won't work, because there's no one to actually bring resolution to a story. This is a lovely one out near Glastonbury, and the lady married, and the husband, it was his house with for generations, and she didn't feel she was in charge of her own home. Has anyone ever felt that they're not in charge of their own home? Yeah, a few times. Okay. It's more common than you think. And I walk into the kitchen, and these are just ladies there, but I saw 3 ladies dressed in black, nattering away in the kitchen, and they were still running the home. But they were the ancestors of the husband. So they were still there. And they had practiced, you know, witchcraft and herbal medicines, as my client was. But they didn't see eye to eye. And we had to, I had to get my client to talk to them and say, look, we're doing the same herbal magic, strange woo-woo stuff, but I'm doing it in a different way, you know, 100 years later. And that way they could understand. Because remember, when somebody passes away and gets locked into that, you know, the in-between spirit world, they are stuck with the concepts and realities of their time. So they need to be reminded and upgraded that we're actually 100, 200 years on. So that come across quite a lot. Oh, the sins of the father. You know, we've again, another Shakespeare quote. You know, what we, and actually sins of the mothers as well, but it's always, you know, the sins of the father. Maybe they create more sins, I don't know. So this was an amazing, so my client, the son, who's an estate agent, and he's waking up and things aren't working in life. He's actually one of my House Whispering Academy students now. But nothing's working, and so this is the house that, well, his wife actually inherited. But if we go back to great-grandfather, he was a church stonemason, and he was doing really good work and very successful, one of the richest men in Cyprus. And then his son, client's grandfather, went to the quarry business, taking from Mother Earth, from the quarries. And it's like taking from the feminine, Mother Earth, and not giving back. So he was a gambler, womanizer, and he lost it all to the women he was womanizing with. Interesting. Judgment, or that's just a sort of the fact timeline. So passing that on to the father, the son's father, so grandfather's son, he continued in the estate agency. He took on the gambling and womanizing, so continuing that DNA pattern, and not successful at all. And so his son comes along, my client, and he's beginning to go into estate agency, and he's becoming aware and waking up to all this stuff. So the only way to clear him of those karmic patterns was to get him to talk to grandfather. So we had to jump past the father, a couple of generations, back to grandfather, and actually great-grandfather to bring some common sense to grandfather, and get some sort of resolution and understanding going. And things have started shifting for him now in current life. So we can go back several generations to fix, resolve, heal something, and then in kind of quantum time leaps, bring it back to current time. And it's something I do a lot with clients when it's kind of a psychotherapeutic regression, I call it. You take someone back to the trauma point, and then there's a process of actually bringing them through the trauma, but through the heart. And again, it's the only way to do that is through the heart. And back to the present moment, in the process, gathering all the sort of lost soul fragments, so a kind of shamanic soul fragment retrieval, if you like. So, another dishonouring Mother Earth. This is quite an interesting story. So I was called to Amman in Jordan to teach a group of about 16 architects this work, which I thought was amazing. So we had a great weekend working with the group. You see them all dowsing, some more sensitive than others as usual, but really good. We actually worked a lot with transforming okay, don't want to work again. Transforming material. So when you get materials that are really heavy, aggressive, rough, like concrete, for example, you can actually take that concrete And a lot of people say, oh, concrete, you know. In fact, concrete's not a problem. It's the steel in concrete, in flats, that's a problem. Because the steel actually creates, like a Faraday cage, and cuts them off from cosmic and earth energies. So the concrete's not a problem, but it can be quite a rough energy. So I showed them how to transmute the molecular structure of the concrete into putty. So, and it's done through the heart. You process it through the heart like a washing machine. And then it comes out the other side. And we did this experiment of 2 chunks of concrete the same, or 2 bricks, blind tests, and got them to do one, and then got someone else to come and pick one up. And the one that was processed was like a feather, and the other one was as heavy as concrete. Literally. And I did this with some clients in Vienna. They bought a flat in the block of concrete structure. And so there were several concrete, and no windows, it was just a bare structure. And it felt really aggressive and rough. So we did this heart processing with the concrete. And it began to feel, and you could douse it, and really feel the concrete was softening and becoming malleable and easier to be in. And I said, okay, let's just try something. Let's go to the flat upstairs, because all the stairs were open. Exactly the same physical structure, but you could really feel the aggressiveness of the concrete. Came back down, and it was like soft putty to the one we'd worked on. So if you ever have a building that is really rough and doesn't feel good, and we've done all the space clearing, everything else we've learnt in Feng Shui, there is that other step of processing the material through the heart, and it will soften it. Now there is another image. Yes, okay. So there's something I had to say there to release that. So this is a rather, this block of flats here was built by a father of my client. And everybody, all the family had a different apartment in this block. And they were all ill, bankrupt, divorced. Nothing was going right for any of them. The father had built it, dug into foundations. And this is about, again, dishonouring Mother Earth. So there wasn't any ceremony, it's not a common thing to do these days, but it should be. Certainly as architect, I would do that. And encourage you to do that. Always have ceremony before you cut into the land. So this wasn't done. So again, the son and the whole family were paying the price of that. So, and my particular client, his wife had some serious cancer issues. So we went through the whole length of the ground floor. And if I compress a whole block of flats between here and the table, I'd like that. So every time we went past an earth energy line, I was getting like a 10 out of 10 crossing on the energy lines. And as you know, anything over 5 is cancer forming. So it made sense. So what to do about that? Do we acupuncture it? Do we do whatever? Do we get rid of it? This is quite, I don't know what you might have been taught in dowsing, because the normal approach to dowsing, if there's a problem, is what? We've got a problem. We've got an energy line. What do we do with it? What's a common sort of response? Let's get rid of it. Yeah. You can't get rid of it because it's yours. It's your stuff. We touched on that this morning. It's your stuff. It's your story. You can pretend to get rid of it. You've done your job as a consultant. You've gone off. A week later, it's back. Because if you haven't got the client to process it, they haven't dealt with it internally, so they're going to bring it back. Like people in these TV movies where they go in, they do the renovations, they come back a week later and they're excited or they're devastated. And if they're devastated because they haven't processed the issues, they go to the skips and second-hand shops and bring it all back. So you can't get rid of something, because to try and get rid of means you're actually not actually facing why that issue is there. So, so I didn't do that here. And I got this guy, and this guy, the client, I mean, is big. And his job was to move mountains, cut mountains. And so did his father. So his job was to actually cut up Mother Earth for building projects. So that added to the whole thing. So I resorted to the, the forgiveness, the Ho'oponopono. But in this case, I just said we're going to do forgiveness for Mother Earth, for what your father did and what you've been doing in cutting mountains without permission. Doesn't mean we can't do these things, but we've got to do it in right process and with permission. So we sat down for about 20 minutes and went into a meditation. I just gave him simple instructions just to apologize on behalf of Father. And we came out of it about 15, 20 minutes later, and this big burly guy was just streaming tears. I said, well, what happened? What did you do? And he said, I just saw this woman radiating in blue and white. We're right on the doorstep, Mother Mary. And that's who he saw. And at the time, I'd been working with the energy of Kuan Yin. And I saw Kuan Yin. So we were seeing and experiencing the same Mother Earth feminine energy, but translating it in our own way. Doesn't matter. And he was just totally blown out by it. He just, you could really feel he'd done the do, he'd done the apology. So soon after that, he sort of come round, and I went back through with the dowsing rods over those same lines. Remember, we had 10 out of 10 negative. We went through, 10 out of 10 positive on each line. That was within a half hour of change. Yeah? Back to reality. That's the power of the hard work and the forgiveness. And the extreme opposite of what it can create. We then went to this site where he'd been working currently, and we did some more inner work there. And what I didn't say was a couple of weeks before my visit, the government suddenly pulled the plug on his business and froze his assets. He couldn't work. He was in panic because his daughter was getting married, he had no money, he couldn't function. So, that was his story. But it had to get him to that point to actually do something about it. So next day we were going back to the workshop, and we get a phone call in the car saying, Christian, guess what happened this morning? The government called me into their offices and they've unfrozen my assets. I was just like, wow. You couldn't make that up. Extraordinary. So that's the power of doing things in the right way. This is a story down in Devon, and that's me being a house whisperer, of course, doing the do. And this lady, it actually looks like her. It's the closest picture I could get without putting her picture up. This whole area was a monastery. So that church was a monastery, dissolution of the monasteries with Henry VIII. And her house, the garden wall, was actually the original wall of the monastery garden. So she was living in that energy, but she was the abbess at the time. And she kind of knew it, but by engaging with someone like myself, it brings out the memory so that she can come forward and remember and then actually do something about it. So a lot of our work as consultants is never to do something for someone, but to actually get them to wake up to what is going on, and to get them to do the inner work and the resolution and take responsibility. If we don't do that, we're not doing our job. So definitely can't do it for anyone. And so she was constantly in battle with everyone, all the neighbours, always in battle, fighting, legal cases. So that's really her attitude to everyone around, and that's really her inner self, that sort of warrior woman. So, yeah, so are you listening to what your house and ancestors are trying to tell you? Thank you.